We will get started, and if anybody else joins, they'll just hop on. So, hello everyone, welcome. This is Jean Treist again from the Department of Traffic Safety, and she's going to be presenting on the rules and regulations of driving today. So again, I will stop by classrooms after to distribute the DMV permit test books for those that need it. So Jean, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Hannah. So good morning, everyone. This is our third and final presentation. There'll be some things that are referenced from earlier presentations, and most of them are should be common knowledge too. So hopefully you'll remember the things we've talked about in the past. Remember, you can use the chat or you can unmute yourself when I ask questions. And today we are going to be talking about the rules and regulations when driving in New York State. So again, any questions, please let us know. We're happy to answer them throughout the presentation. So if you need to stop and ask anything, that's fine. Have no problem with that. So today, when we're talking about the rules and regulations, some very important things we're going to go over right now are the laws for driving in New York State. And there are different laws if you are 16 or 17 years old. Today, we're only talking about if you're 18 years and older. So if anyone has questions about getting a learner's permit when you're 16 or 17, I will make sure that everyone has my information to contact me, and I'll be very happy to answer any questions you have. In the DMV booklet that Hannah will be handing out, that information also is in there. So it also has what's called a GDL, a graduated driver's license, or just a regular Class D license. So you'll understand, you'll be able to see all that information, but I am happy to answer questions. So laws for driving in New York State. First thing is you have to obtain a New York State learner driver permit. And you go to the DMV with your required documentation. And right now with DMV, there are different types of identifications you can receive. There's a real ID, and then there's another ID that you can utilize if you will be traveling on a plane. And I'm going to double check and see what the name of that one is. Sorry, I didn't want to mess up these names. So there's a standard, which is your Class D license. There's an enhanced, which means you can travel to and from Canada with it. And then there's the real ID, and that's the one that can be utilized when you're on an airplane. So there are different forms of it, and that will say what type of fee you'll pay. But again, there is required documentation for those. And all that can be found on the DMV website. They give each piece of documentation a number, and you have to total a certain amount to know that you're able to get your driver's permit as something different. So again, all that's explained. Today, we're mainly just talking about the driver permit and using it for driving. There will be a written test you can take. There are many practice tests online that are great way to practice. It can be seen in different languages also. There's a button on the website that you can press, and there's an option of multiple languages there if that helps you. This is something where you may want to, instead of reading it in English, make sure you're reading it in your native language, just so that you're sure you completely understand the questions. Is there a question? No? Okay. So next, again, we have to remember driving is a privilege, not a right. So that's why you have to get the permit first, and then you can go on to finish up the testing and receive your license. So there's what's called a pre-licensing course that you have to pass. It's 5 hours long. You can do one in person. And I know that at Oasis, you do have some type of a relationship with a driving school. Hannah, which driving school was it again?
All right, School of Driving.
Okay, so the All Right School of Driving, if you have questions, Hannah can help you, or someone at Oasis. So you can take an in-person course. There is a fee, or there's an online course. And right at this time, there's only one online course that's approved for New York State permits. And I'll make sure Hannah has that link to send out to everybody. It is $49. You still do the full 5 hours. It's structured in a way that you can't move on until you've answered questions, and you have 30 days to also finish up that course. So if you need time, or again, English is your second language, this is a way that it gives you more time to understand what they're teaching you and to be able to pass the quizzes that are throughout the presentation. So remember, this is for 18 years old and older. All right. So when you do practice driving, it is not a requirement for someone who is over the age of 18. If you're 16 or 17, it is, and a form has to be filled out. But practice driving should be for anybody, any age. It doesn't matter. If you've been driving in another country, rules and laws, regulations may be different than when you're driving here. So we want to be sure you're going to be able to pass that driving test, the physical driving test, and you're prepared for it. So for practice driving, you must drive with a licensed driver who's at least 21 years old, and they must be in the front seat. But it has to be a license that's in New York State. It can't be from a foreign country or anything like that. So if you have a license from a foreign country, the only thing that does not apply to you is having the licensed supervised driver with you. That's the only thing that's different. But if this is the first time you're obtaining a driver's license in any country, you have to follow that regulation. You must drive with a licensed driver, at least 21 years old, and they have to be seated in the front seat. So keep that in mind, especially if you know you're preparing to get your permit. Make sure you are going to have someone who's going to be able to assist you. And just because practice driving is not required when you're over the age of 18, it is highly recommended. So it's something you want to do, and make sure you're feeling comfortable with what the rules and regulations here in the United States are. So are there any questions for that? Okay, great. And then the last thing you would do is you would schedule your road test. And there are different locations you can have your road test in. And the only thing you cannot do is practice driving where those road tests are, where they take place. They do them in those locations because there are a lot of obstacles that you would that you might come across as if you were doing regular driving. So that's why you're not allowed to practice driving in those locations. And those are all listed out on the DMV website. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, I said, make sure you go into DMV. Right now, everything's still changing a little bit as more things are opening, less restrictions due to the COVID-19. So make sure you look at the website first, the New York State DMV website, to see they may only be scheduling appointments, or they may allow you to walk in just for certain things. But I believe anyone who will be taking a permit test, it has to be scheduled. So please check that, because again, it can change as more and more restrictions are lifted. Okay. So that was talking about everything you need to be a licensed driver. I'm going to actually go back one more time. So remember, driving without a license is a ticketable offense. There are fines associated with it. There are also fees that need to be paid to DMV. It will just make it harder for you down the road to receive your license if you are caught driving without a license. And you have to make sure the vehicle you're driving in is registered and insured, because those also will get you a ticket. So we want to be sure that everything that you're doing goes along with the regulations for driving in New York State. Because again, driving is not a right, it's a privilege. And that's why you have to obtain the correct documentation and make sure your vehicle is registered and insured properly. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about some things we talked about in the past. So we talked about the New York State Occupant Protection Law, and that's where we're wearing seatbelts or using a car seat or a booster seat. And remember, the new law is everyone in the car needs to be restrained, no matter where they're sitting in the car, front seat or back seat, either by a seatbelt or a child restraint. And please remember, there's no sharing of seatbelts, no sharing of child restraints, especially if children are different sizes. It's very hard to share a child restraint from child to child, because remember, those harnesses need to be moved, or depending on the child's age, the direction the car seat is in. So I know Hannah had made available many handouts that are in many different languages. So if you have any questions, you can always feel free to contact me or contact Hannah or your teacher, and I will be happy to assist you with any of that. So just remember, buckling up is one of the safest things you can do in the car. The airbag will only protect you if you're using your seatbelt properly. And remember, those kids should be in the back seat till they're at least 13. The force of that airbag opening up at 200 miles per hour can actually injure or kill a child instead of keeping them safe. So those adult-sized airbags in the front seat are not for kids. So keep those things in mind. And it was very interesting. The other day, I had an Uber driver contact me and wanted to know what she could do if someone is trying to get in her vehicle with children, but they do not have a car seat or booster seat available. And an Uber or a Lyft driver, a taxi, or I shouldn't say that, an Uber or Lyft driver, you have to have a child restraint for your child. You have to follow the New York State law. Taxis, the child just has to be in the back seat. They cannot be in the front seat. So keep all of that in mind. And remember, if you're going to be utilizing that form of drive share, make sure you have what you need, because the Uber driver I spoke to said she does not allow children in her vehicle unless they have the proper restraint. So most likely, I believe it is an Uber and Lyft regulation, you probably will not be able to get that ride. So make sure you're aware of what the law is. All right, so we want to drive distraction free. This is where I need your help. So either type into the chat or unmute yourselves. What are distractions when you're driving? What is something that distracts your mind when you're in a vehicle and you're the driver? Let's hear them. Anybody can let me know. No answers to this question? There's gotta be. Nobody? My Oasis people, do you want to unmute and ask your participants that are in class? No? Yes? Oh, maybe we have something in the chat, Hannah. I just saw something appear.
Yes, someone said phones and music.
Phones and music, very good. Music very loud is going to affect you being able to hear what's going on around you, especially in the winter. If we have our cars all closed up, we have the heat on, we're nice and toasty warm in that car, we may forget about listening and looking for what's around us. So that's really important. And everyone knows the phones. It's actually a New York State law that you have to be hands-free. So you can't have the phone up here. That's going to get you a ticket. And you're going to get 5 points on your license. You can only get up to 11 points and then your license is taken away. So you're working hard to get that license. You don't want it to be taken away. Those 5 points will make those 11 points go away very quickly. So please be sure. Watching videos, I have people who are making Snapchats or videos they're posting on Facebook, or they're going Facebook Live while they're driving their car. That's illegal. Anytime your phone is transmitting information via a video is illegal. It's against the law. That's part of that distracted driving law. As the driver, you cannot be watching a video at any time. What else?
Karaoke at high volume. So
Okay.
singing in the car.
Singing in the car, that can do it. And guess what else can be a distraction? Those passengers in the car. So it can be a screaming child. It can be that passenger that wants you to go a different direction than what you're going. Just speaking with someone in the car can be distracting, but not as distracting as if you're on the phone. So if your phone's up here, that's distracting you 2 ways. It's distracting you because manually your hands, both hands are not on the steering wheel. And that's part of the law. Both hands have to be on the steering wheel. And when it's up here and you're talking, you're using your brain. And then you're being distracted by 2 things, because manually both hands aren't on the wheel. And to control a 3,000-pound vehicle, you need to have both hands on the wheel. And then cognitively, or with your brain is now on that phone call instead of what you should be doing, which is driving. So now you're not as aware of your surroundings. We actually lose up to 50% of what's around us when we're distracted. So instead of seeing this whole entire windshield, you're just going to see one area in front of you. You're like putting on blinders, like what a horse uses. You're not going to see those peripherals. You're going to miss a lot. So even though hands-free driving is legal, it's not the best choice because your mind is still distracted. So that's the cognitive, the brain is still distracted. It takes us approximately 23 seconds once you get off the phone with somebody to actually put your full attention back on driving. So today, when you get in a car or you're even on the bus, whatever form of transportation you're using, count 23 seconds and see how far you travel and think of all those things you could have missed. Look around, look for pedestrians, look for bicyclists, look for motorcycles now that the weather's getting much warmer. Those are things you can miss. So make sure, even though hands-free is okay in New York State, try to be phone-free, period. That means no texting, no taking of videos, no phone calls at all. And what else?
Someone said eating.
Eating, big one, because as I have my coffee right here, if I'm reaching down to get my coffee, my eyes now are looking down and they're not on the road. And just those 2 or 3 seconds can make a huge difference. What else do you think would distract you in the car? Does anyone have pets?
Our student, oh, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, now I can.
Oh, yes. Okay. So a student said kids with a very loud exclamation.
Yes. And that is so true. Your child could drop something on the floor and be screaming because they want that item. Turning and reaching is another, what we call a, distraction, because reaching for something and turning, I'm taking my eyes off the road. I might lean down to even reach something that fell on the floor. Look at that. I even left your screen for a few seconds there. So that's what can happen. Your eyes are not on that road. What else?
looking outside at the beauty of the world.
There you go. It could be something outside the car. It could be people outside the car. Maybe you're looking at something, an unfortunate crash that happened 2 years ago. There was a woman driving down Lyle Avenue right before Wegmans, and she had her 2 children in the back seat, and she swerved off to the side of the road and actually ran over a wagon that 2 children were in. Those 2 children were severely injured. When the officers asked what she was doing and why she drove off the road, she said she was tending to screaming children. But that was actually a lie. It turns out she was taking a picture of a sign in a building that said for lease. And she was taking that picture to give to someone to have that phone number. So for her to take one picture and her eyes off the road, she has affected 2 people. She has affected the whole entire family. It isn't just her, and she actually went to jail for it. It was just decided earlier this year that she had a jail sentence. So again, your actions, there are all different types of actions you can take when you're in the car, but there's your actions or your choices can make a difference in someone else's life. I saw someone unmuted.
We were talking in here about emotions, like if you're upset or crying, or a student just said if you're preoccupied with something.
Yes. Very true. Very, very true. Emotional driving is terrible. That's where road rage might come in, or you're so emotional, you don't realize that it's affecting your driving. I want to tell you about a really good song. It's a Tim McGraw song, and it was put out a few years back. And it was, oh, now I got to remember the name. The Highway Don't Care. That's what it is. So it's an awesome song. The video, the reason Tim McGraw wrote this song was for his children. And in the video, they show someone who's very emotional, gets in the car and is driving. Her phone falls onto the floor. She reaches to grab it and is involved in a horrific crash. So it's showing her parents, how it affected her parents, how it affected her boyfriend, and affected the doctor who had to be involved in it. It's a very good song and a very nice tribute to distracted driving victims. I think Tim McGraw did that well. So anything else? Who can think of something else?
I mean, someone else said driving excited or an agitated state.
Very
So
good.
any sort of emotion.
Yep. And you guys can see I'm putting lots of pictures out here. I think you got them all. We didn't get makeup. We didn't get shaving. So there are a lot of things that can distract you. Again, I said passengers can. Oh, pets. We forgot about our pets. Our pets should actually be in some type of a restraint. And they sell many different restraints on the market for your pets. There have been cases where people's dogs have gone missing or their pets have gone missing because in a crash, they're thrown around the vehicle. When first responders or people come upon the crash, they didn't realize there was an animal in the car and that pet goes missing. Because if that pet isn't restrained, that pet can then leave the vehicle and run due to the traumatic experience. So there's a lot of things out there that can affect us, and we need to make sure we're aware of those. And like I said, drive distraction free. Anyone else? Was that it, Hannah? Yep. Okay. So now we're going to talk about speeding. You either want to drive at or below the speed limit. Does anyone know what the speed limit is in the city of Rochester?
The speed limit is in Rochester, in the city, and 30, 35, I think 35. Yeah. 35. They see? Yes, 35.
So did someone have an answer there? I didn't catch that. Does anyone know what the speed limit is in the city of Rochester?
My students were saying 35.
35. Anyone else?
Maybe 30 also.
30. Okay. Anyone else?
Yes,
Someone else said 30.
Yeah, wait.
30?
That is good.
30 is the correct answer unless it's posted at a different speed. So if you are on a street in the city of Rochester, it is 30, is straight across the board, unless it's posted differently. So the people that said 35, it's 35. It might go down to 20 in a school zone. It may go down to 25 on some side streets. So it is different, but 30 is the answer. That is what it is on every street unless it's posted differently. So part of West Ridge Road goes city, and then part of it's Greece, and then part of it's city again. So what they did there on West Ridge Road, it's all 35 just to keep it consistent. A lot of your main thoroughfares, something like Lake Avenue. I'm trying to think of another one. Lake Avenue, anything that's 4 lanes, South Avenue, when it goes to 4 lanes, there are a few of those main thoroughfares that will be 35, but again, it will be posted as 35. If there is no posted limit, it's 30. It doesn't mean 31 or 32. It means 30. There are limits. That means that's the fastest you can go. So that's why I said drive at or below the speed limit. Just because traffic is traveling faster doesn't mean you have to, but you can't drive too slow. So if it's 35 and you're doing 20, that does become a hazard. Or if you're doing 15 and it's posted at 35, those can be hazards. So you do have that little bit of leeway, I'd say between 30 and 35, if it's a 35 mile per hour posted speed limit. And it's not an excuse to tell a police officer, well, everyone else was doing it. Why did you stop me? It's not an excuse. There is a limit, and there's a reason there's that limit. We actually can stop 22 feet sooner than just by going 5 miles per hour slower. So that's why the speeds get slower around schools or around areas where there are a lot of people. So around Highland Hospital, around Rochester General, around University of Rochester or Strong Hospital, the speed limits are slower. And there they actually have the signs that tell you you have to stop for pedestrians in the walkways or in the crosswalks. So there they've made it so that sign is there, and that's part of New York State law, that if you are traveling in an area and there are crosswalks and they have a posted sign, you must stop, but there isn't an actual physical stop sign there, you still have to stop. So things are a little different. That's again why you need to know the rules and regulations of driving in New York State and the United States. So it's very important. So remember, we talked about this formula before. Your weight times the speed the car is going is how much your seatbelt or the child restraint has to hold back. So you want to make sure if you're speeding, as the speeds get higher, that number is going to get higher. That's actually a physics formula that I've made very simple. And there's what's called delta V, and it means that things as the speeds get higher exponentially, the restraining force gets higher. So it actually doubles or triples as the speeds get higher. It's just making this formula simple is the reason why I don't have that in there. So just remember that when you're on the highways, there's a reason it's 55. So keep that in mind. Any questions on speed limits? Okay, great. All right, do not drive impaired by alcohol or other drugs. Alcohol is a drug.
What's
That's why
impaired?
I use the word or.
What's impaired?
Impaired means that you've impaired your mind by drinking alcohol or taking drugs. So impaired means you're not the same as you normally are. Did that make sense?
You have 1 or 2 drinks. That's bad. You gotta think really.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you very well. It's very low. Was there another question? Okay. So impaired means you're not the same as you normally are. You can be impaired by alcohol, by drinking too much. You can be impaired by smoking marijuana, doing heroin, doing cocaine. There's all sorts of drugs out there that will impair you. And all of those are illegal to use or be under the influence of when you're driving, because they change how your body reacts. First of all, your reaction time gets slower. It's harder to hear things. I don't know if you've ever noticed someone who has drank alcohol, their voice gets louder because their hearing is affected. That's why bars and clubs are so noisy, because first of all, it's usually the music, but when people are impaired, they don't hear things as well, so they talk louder. Your eyesight can be impaired. Same thing happens. You might get that tunnel vision, or you get the blurred or double vision. So it's harder for you to read a road sign that's in front of you. Also, you can just be more relaxed, so you're not as aware of your surroundings. So it is affecting your brain. So that's why we do not drive once you've had any alcohol or if you've taken any other drugs. But that can also include prescription drugs. On most prescription bottles or even over-the-counter drugs, it says do not drive until you know how this medication may change you or affect your body. So you have to be aware of that. And sometimes taking a prescription drug and drinking alcohol or smoking marijuana are things that's called synergy. When two things are used together, that's when you can have a problem. And that's when you could be affected more than you think. So you may be taking cold medicine and drinking alcohol, but when you drink alcohol, you know 2 drinks is your limit, and then you wait before you get on the road. But if you're taking something else, again, a cold medicine, it may take you longer. You may not be yourself longer. So you have to be cautious of that.
We did have one question saying, is it true that a person impaired by sleep deprivation can be even more dangerous than people under the influence of drugs?
Love the question. You actually just read my second slide. So you did a really good job. So I just wanted to make sure everyone knows that your poor choice, because it's a choice to drink alcohol or use other drugs and get in a car, and it can affect other people. So just like driving distracted is a choice, driving under the influence of alcohol or other drugs is a choice. There are other ways you can make decisions before you drink to say, someone take my keys. I know I'm going to call a ride share. Maybe I'll stay the night at someone's house. So there are choices. And if you make them before you're affected by that alcohol or other drugs, you have a plan in place. So very good. And now for the person who presented my next slide, good job. Do not drive tired or fatigued. Staying awake for 18 plus hours, which can be a normal day from some people. You're up at 6, getting ready for work, get the kids off to school, go do your job or go to school. After school, you take the kids to play a sport, go to the playground, do whatever you're gonna do, fix a meal, help your kids with their homework or do your own homework. And now it is 11:30 at night and you realize you have no bread for lunches the next day. Do you think it's a good choice to go out and buy bread? You have to travel a mile to get to that grocery store. Is it a good choice or a bad choice? I'm going to go with bad choice, because staying awake for 18 hours or more has the same effect as if you're driving with a 0.08 BAC or blood alcohol concentration. And that is the legal limit for driving impaired by alcohol. So you're driving as if you are impaired. Now, you may not show the same signs of impairment, like look drunk. Your eyes may not be all bloodshot. You may not be slurring your words or stumbling when you walk, but your brain and your body are going to be affected the same way. Your brain is not going to be able to take in everything that's coming at it when you're a driver. So you're going to have those vision problems. You're going to have that reaction time is going to be slower, moving your foot from the gas to the brake. You're going to have difficulties doing that. So we want to be sure you are not driving that way, because the effects on your body are the same as if you drank alcohol or took other drugs. There are what we call police officers who, and I'm going to go back here to driving impaired or by alcohol or other drugs. There are police officers called DREs. They're drug recognition experts. And those officers are specifically trained to be able to tell if a person is utilizing some type of other drug. And they may be called to the scene if you're pulled over by a police officer, or there's been a fatal crash or serious injury in a crash, just to be sure that you're not impaired by other drugs. Because to have the breathalyzer test, it has to be alcohol in your system. That's the only thing that test can see how alcohol is affecting your body. And again, it's that level of the blood alcohol concentration. But at the moment, there is no spit test or machine that can be used on the side of the road to test for other drugs. So that specially trained officer can tell by facial features, your eye movements. They can tell by, of course, how you're walking. There are different types of agility type tests that when you're impaired, you will not pass, but you would pass if you weren't impaired. So there are different ways that other drugs can be detected in your system. Any questions on that?
I have a question.
Sure.
What if so there's people that are basically tolerant to alcohol, so they can drink as much as they want, and they like it doesn't like affect them. They still stay like sober, and they can think clearly. But the thing, like the things that you blow in, it's gonna show that you're under influence, but they don't realize it.
Right. And that can happen with a lot of people who are daily drinkers, daily marijuana smokers, daily drug users. They do become more tolerant to the drug. So what they have to do, or the alcohol or the drug, so what they have to do is use more of it to feel that high, to have their body feel different, but it's still showing that they're impaired. So they are still impaired under the law, because that's the way our law is written. So they will be given a ticket, and the higher your BAC is going to determine the offense you have. If your BAC is higher than a 0.18, it's automatically a felony. If you're driving and you have a BAC higher than 0.08 and you have children in the car, it's automatically a felony. If does anyone want to be a truck driver, a school bus driver, work for Amazon, work for UPS? All those, any of those people who are professional drivers in that respect, especially driving something bigger than a normal vehicle, you are only given one chance. They will actually report to your work that you received a DWI. You can lose your license, your CDL, or your higher operator's license if you are caught driving with alcohol or other drugs, even in your personal car. Not even in the work car, not on the bus, not on your 18-wheeler. If it's in your personal car, it affects you. It affects that stage of license that you have. So there are many things that in your personal life can affect what you do if you are driving professionally. Any other questions? Okay. So again, driving tired or fatigued, not a good idea. We don't realize how much sleep deprivation changes our body. You may be used to it and just not realize how much it will affect you when you're driving, when you're operating a vehicle. So that's why it's so important to try and keep up on your sleep. Try to get anywhere from 7 to 8 hours as an adult. Teens need more like 10, and children, infants especially, could go 16 to 20 and to only be awake for those few hours when they are eating or maybe getting a bath or something. So infants really need all that sleep. So there are different ways, and depending on who you are as a person and how much sleep your body needs so that you can react normally to situations.
Someone also said that driving tired or fatigued can affect cognitive decision making. So
Very good.
using your brain to make decisions, like you said.
And it's actually the front part of our brain that is most important. So why we wear helmets when we're on bicycles, to protect the front part of our brain. It's actually the reason why we have the shoulder portion of our seatbelt up here, because it protects the top part of our body. As soon as you've injured the front part of your brain, you make poor decisions after that. Teens make poor decisions just because this part of their brain is not fully developed. And it might take them till they're 20, 24, 26, till this is called your prefrontal cortex or your frontal lobe, until that's fully developed and you're able to make good choices. So it's a reason why in our 20s, we might make poor choices. As teens, we make poor choices just because we don't realize those choices are poor. And hopefully, if you've made a poor choice, you learn from it and you don't do it again. So that's life pretty much for everyone. So good. I love the answers you guys are giving. The statements, the questions, they're phenomenal. Thank you so much. All right. Now here's where I need participation. What makes a good defensive driver? We've talked about a lot of them. What might be some other things? Anybody? Speak up.
I'll keep the chat open.
Okay. Anyone have anything good to tell us?
Respecting the rules of driving.
Very good. So we talked in the beginning, even when you have your permit and you're over the age of 18, you don't have to do that practice driving, but we highly recommend it. Practice is what's going to make you a better driver. No one is a great driver. If anyone tells you a great driver, they're lying to you, because no one is. No one's really great at anything. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make poor choices, do things wrong. So you want to be a good defensive driver, and
Nice.
I guess you can be great if you're a great passenger.
Yeah.
Nice, nice food,
Okay.
nice craft.
What else did I have?
Sometimes I feel that people who drive a lot, they kind of lose the point of taking the rules, of following the rules. They feel like they know everything, so they can kind of go behind them. That's my opinion. I don't know.
I will tell you, my father has owned a tow truck business for as long as I've been alive, and that's 55 years. Okay. And my mother was a professional driver for Medical Motors. And they do, unfortunately, people that are professional drivers sometimes get lax and do not follow the rules and regulations as they should. My father loved to drive left of the line all the time. So that center line, my father would be driving almost even with it instead of being in his lane. So staying in your lane is very important. My father had that difficulty. So, and my parents know I talk about them in my presentation, so they don't mind. I can use them as examples.
Someone said same with their father. So
Yeah.
as you can see, it happens more often than we think.
Yes. So the more you can be a good defensive driver, the better off things are. Unfortunately, we can't teach everybody that or expect everyone to follow that rule. But I'm going to tell you to pay it forward again. If there's something you like about my presentation today, please pass it along. People say, oh, who knows? I'm going to give you a good question. To be a good defensive driver, when you're stopped at a stoplight, how much room should you have between you and the car in front of you? Who knows? What part of the
Is it like 3
vehicle should-
seconds?
That's when you're driving. Yep, when the car is moving. Very good. I like that answer. So when you're moving, you can do that. And I'll send a video to Hannah so she can get it out to everybody of what we call, it's the 2 or 3 second rule. In the driver's manual, it teaches you the 2 second rule, but as the weather conditions get bad, your brakes might not be 100% on your car, your tires are bald, there may be some things that are different. They teach you the 2 second rule, but it gets higher. Those seconds will get higher as it becomes, as things change on the roadway. And I saw someone typed in 1 car length. 1 car length is no more. When I was 16, I learned that, but it is not, it's hard to judge because now we have cars that might only be 12 feet long. Maybe it's a smart car.
Or like a
Or is
truck.
it your big Suburban you're driving in? Is it that car that's 22 feet long? What length is that? So by doing the second rule, the 2 to 3 second rule, it goes with every single vehicle and it goes with the speed you are driving. So it can't change. It can be consistent no matter where you're driving or what you're driving. It's very consistent. So great answers. That's awesome that you knew that. And there was one more thing I was going to say with that, and I lost my train of thought because you guys have such great answers and great questions. So what else makes you a good defensive driver? Maybe even some things we've already talked about. And we'll see if you're remembering what we talk about. Anybody? Help me out here.
Caring about safety, everyone.
Yeah, caring about what's going on around you. There can be so many things that can distract you while you're driving that not realizing there's someone walking across the crosswalk. Or if a ball bounces into the road, what's usually coming after that ball? There's probably going to be a child coming after that ball. So being aware of those surroundings is so, so important. And if any of you are taking driver's lessons, I give you huge kudos because they will teach you all of that. And that practice driving is mandatory when you're taking driving lessons. If you don't do those, they're not going to pass you. Plus, they also help you schedule your road test and get you prepared for everything. They do the pre-licensing course with you. They're sure that all the paperwork goes to DMV that's needed. So taking driving lessons can be very helpful. Anyone? No one? I don't know what time it is. 10:50. Okay. Well,
Someone
thanks,
did.
guys. Oh, go ahead.
Someone said one more thing and maybe a couple questions. Someone said predictive driving, anticipate situations, and on warmer days, like expecting to see motorcycles on the road.
Yes, very important. The one crash that happened over the weekend, that was the motorcyclist's fault. So it can go both ways with motorcycles. It can be their fault if they're driving erratically, or it can be the driver's fault because we don't see them. We sometimes don't anticipate motorcycles, and especially when you have a couple of warm days in the middle of winter / spring, there can be problems and you just don't see them. So we have to always anticipate something happening. One thing you can do too when you want to be a good defensive driver is always have an out. Always have somewhere, so since you're constantly aware of your surroundings, be aware of somewhere you can go. If the car in front of you stops quickly, and can you move to the next lane? Or is there a barrier there? When you're getting onto the inner loop downtown on State Street, there are just barriers. There's 2 lanes and barriers. So you have to really be aware of your surroundings because there is no out on either side. The only out is running into that barrier. So those are things they will teach you as you're driving. And if you don't have someone as an instructor teaching you, these are things you can look into and be aware of. The pre-licensing course really does a good job of doing that. I looked at the pre-licensing course, the only one that's online, and just even looking at what they teach you are things you should be practicing while you're driving. So when you're taking that course, those are then the things you should practice. And you may have been taught different things in your native country than what are rules and regulations here in the United States. I know in some areas in war-torn countries, it's drive as fast as you can to get from point A to point B because that's survival. But we don't do that here in the United States. And a lot of times when soldiers come home from overseas, they have a hard time adapting to driving safely here in the US because they've been driving the other way so much. A lot of other countries do not use car seats or seat belts. Here in the United States, they're required. So be prepared to know what the rules and regulations are here in the United States.
And yes, someone said, and experience makes the best teacher. If you've been in an accident, even though you were in an accident, you pick up new skills and insights to know what to do for next time.
And it is. That's where practice makes perfect. And again, poor choices could be made by the other drivers, not just you. So be aware, know your surroundings. And if you're a good defensive driver, hopefully other people in your family are going to be good defensive drivers. Children will mimic you. If they've seen you drive a certain way for years, they're going to think that's okay because you've been doing it. So the better driver you are, the better drivers you will raise. So that's important.
We did have one question saying, what is the penalty for getting caught driving by yourself only with a permit?
You can lose your permit. You may have to wait before you are able to take your road test. Depending on if the vehicle wasn't registered or insured, that's going to make it worse. Sometimes it's the judge's decision on what will happen to you. Judges have a lot of leeway there. They can make the decision. Again, those fines and fees are just going to add up. And if you don't pay those fines or fees, you won't be able to get your driver's license. Those will all have to be paid before. So even if you pass your road test, you still can't get your license if there's fines and fees associated with your permit. So it can restrict you from driving. The more and more people drive without a license, and if you get caught, those are things that just keep adding up. Again, it's just more fines and fees and will make it harder for you to become a legal driver here in the United States.
I know from experience with a friend, at least, they drove without their license, but a permit only. And when they heard that they were going to get a fee, it was initially like $50. But what they didn't realize is that there's more fees that come after. So it ended up costing them almost $500 when they thought it was only going to be $40. So that's another thing to keep in mind from friends' experiences.
Yeah, besides the fine, there are DMV fees. The DMV fees can be there for 3 years. So every year you pay $250, and that's part of it. There could be a $90, or there is a I believe went up to $92, a $92 surcharge in New York State, and it goes towards balancing the New York State budget. And I did see, Hannah, I did see that last question in the chat. It says, which booster seat is required for an 8-year-old? And I believe someone asked this in the past. It's hard to say. Again, remember, child restraints, car seats or booster seats, besides the age requirement in the law, there is your height and weight. So height and weight are going to play a big role in which type of seat you purchase. So if that person would like to call me or get a hold of me, quickly I'm going to type in my phone number in the chat, and then I'm going to give you my email address. Just gotta make sure I type it in right. So feel free at any time to contact me. We'll try and keep this open so people can see it. Again, if you're associated with literacy, digital literacy, or with OASIS, they have my information. If you're not, it's posted there in the chat. Grab it really quick, write it down, copy and paste it, whatever you need to do, because I'm more than willing to help you. It's hard for me to say which booster seat is required for an 8-year-old because size is a big factor in that. Okay.
And someone else asked another question about the ages and seat types, so I will have them email or call you.
Perfect.
That's a longer winded answer.
Yes, and that is, again, it's difficult. Every child is different. Every situation is different. Remember, size of vehicle can matter when a child fits into a seatbelt. So if you have a smaller sedan, your 8-year-old might fit better. But if you have a bigger SUV, they might have to go till they're 10 or 11 in a booster seat. So again, that size is a factor.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Jean. This was incredibly informative considering a lot of people are going to be getting their permits and license soon. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Everybody, thank you. Thank you for everyone that was here for this whole series. I appreciate your time. And again, contact me with any questions or concerns.
Have a good day, everyone.